Back in Colorado, almost home. Needed a little break, so I stopped here at this rest stop. Thought I would do a little final video on the bike. You've seen the video on the rider, and so here's the video on the bike. I've loaded up in the truck. I haven't done anything to it since the end of the tour, and just a couple comments. The 4.1 gas tank actually would have been big enough all by itself. I got about 60 plus miles to the gallon. I could have technically made the longest day on that gas tank. Of course, that would have been risky to do that. I actually have two of these giant loop gas bags. One of them's tucked away. If you're going to use a giant loop gas bag, I don't think I'm the only one that had this happen. On the gas cap fell off while I was riding, so I'm missing a gas cap on one of them. I bought a funnel to use as a spare. But so if you're going to store it outside like I do here, make sure it's tight, or put a strap across it, put a piece of tape on it or something. The tires held up well. This is a Moto Z IT Tractionator, Moto Z Tractionator IT, and you can see the mousse in it is still pretty stiff, but by day 7 the mousse in this was pretty much perfect. I could put this bike in second gear, and using the Rekluse, this thing would just claw its way over slippery logs and rocks pretty good. You can see it's chipped a little bit, chunked a little bit, not bad. So the back tire held up really well. The mousse in it, it started off really stiff, but I knew I was, going to deal with that. It was a little stiffer than I was expecting. The chain sprockets, they were brand new. I haven't adjusted them, and it looks like it's really still doesn't really need adjustment. It's right on the, it's probably still within the outer tolerance for adjustment, and nothing special about the sprockets or anything, but they're good to go. The brakes, they were starting to fade a little bit towards the end, but nothing bad. They were still completely usable. Of course, if you guys have watched my videos, you know that I have the Clake left-hand rear brake, and in my opinion, for a beginner rider like me, this was the second or the most important modification done to the bike for the Tour of Idaho. You've probably seen it before, but you can, I'm sitting down here on the ground, but you can easily grab it with your finger, and if you really push hard on it, you can actually make the back brake lock up. But I used it all the time, modulating downhill, and then when I sat down, or sometimes just to rest my finger, I would use the rear brake normally, but I'm not very skilled with it, and I was a lot more confident and comfortable, especially on tight downhill corners, rocky sections, by using the left-hand rear brake. All right, so what else we got going here? Okay, let's talk about the front tire. The front tire is the Shinko 216, and this is a 90/90, and it didn't chunk, I don't think. It's not hardly worn at all. The only thing I don't like about it is the mousse made it too stiff. Now, I probably should have stayed with 90-100. I put a 90-90 to make the front end just a little bit lower, you know, to make the overall bike lower. But it deflected quite a bit. And you can see from it strapped down, it's actually right about ideal now. I did like the fact that I could hit any rock front on, and as long as the tire didn't get chopped in half, no problems. You know, and I don't ride hard or fast enough to bend a rim except for purely by accident. The only thing that I noticed that I lost is you know, the standard radiator guard popped off on this side. I don't know when that happened. You know, they just pop on. So somewhere along the way, you know, that thing got popped off. I put the plastic guards back on instead of the aluminum ones, because the plastic ones are lighter, and this is so protected in here that to me it was worth it to have the lighter weight. I'll put the aluminum ones back on, you know, for future riding. These lightweight plastic wraparound handguards, they work fine. This bike was dropped numerous times on both sides. I like the fact that I could just pop them back into position. They never broke. I was kind of surprised by that. Of course, my turn signals that were on the front, I knew those were going to get ripped off, and they did. But no problems there. The light, you know, I had to adjust it. I had it too low when I first started, but once I got it set, you know, loved the light, had all the light that I needed, plus, you know, that plus my helmet light worked great. So no issues there. The giant loop bags, they were never completely, you know, I always had a little extra room in them that I never wound up using. They weren't really completely stuffed. You know, I had experimented with going with just a tail bag and a little stuff on the front, and I could have done that and kept a narrower profile, and that would have been nice in a couple situations, but it was nice to just be able to throw everything in there and not have to worry about packing. Okay, so the Clake left-hand rear brake, first or second most important modification, and you know, tied with the Clake is the Rekluse. Got a Rekluse in this, and that saves your hands. It allows you to relax. It allows a beginner rider like me to make mistakes, and if you have it adjusted right, it does not stop you from using the clutch. Now, you don't have quite the same real fine feel with the clutch if that Rekluse is in there, but I don't care who you are. After a while, your hands are going to be so tired that you are not going to have, in my opinion, fine clutch control anyway. So to me, that Rekluse it's, you know, for a beginner rider, it's mandatory. That's all there is to it, in my opinion. Otherwise, you're really going to risk tearing your hands up, that sort of thing. Now, the one thing that I wish I wouldn't have done is I put the FMF titanium exhaust system on this. I have no complaints about the exhaust system. It's exactly what they advertise. I put it on mainly for the lightweight, but it was a little bit too abrupt power on the lower end, and so I really had to watch my throttle control when I was in first gear climbing up steep rocky stuff so I wouldn't spin the back tire. So the stock exhaust was actually mellower and easier for a beginner rider, but the stock exhaust would flame out and this one didn't. I put the JD settings, JD Jettings kit on it, and I just basically set it to their standard recommended. I think maybe I'm like 1 or 2 bumps off their standard setting. I know there's a lot more adjustment available with that thing, but I didn't have the time or experience to really know how to maybe mellow the power band out a little bit. I'm sure it could be done, but it would take somebody with a little bit more knowledge than myself. Of course, the engine was rebuilt on this bike over the not over the winter, it was actually in the spring. Engine ran fine, absolutely no problems. I'd put new bearings everywhere except for the steering tube. Yeah, all the other bearings were replaced, and I haven't checked the wheels or anything, but I don't think there's any problems there. Literally, this bike could clean the air filter and turn it around and ride the Tour again on it. Even, you know, no change of tires or anything. It would go. I ran a filter sock, cleaned it at Power Sports in Pocatello on on the rest day, and put it back on. And then I can't remember what day, but on one day, I think it was day 5, where I had lots of extra time, I took it off and cleaned it. I didn't re-oil it, I just cleaned it and popped it back on. And then I took it off the last day, and it's just laying down in the bottom. I guess we could actually look at the filter. So this is the filter that's the filter without doing anything to it. Just the filter sock is off. So that filter now is to the point where it's ready to be cleaned up. Let me put this back on here real quick. Okay, anything else? No issues with navigation. I ran a Garmin Montana as my navigation. I had a Garmin eTrex that I basically used as a speedometer. Both of them were tracking, so I had 2 tracks. I was able to put my smartphone up here. It was kind of nice when I was in town. I could turn the smartphone on and use it to navigate around the streets. Oh, where's the nearest gas station, that sort of thing, just like you do when you're using it in your car. But I out on the trail, it was never mounted up, but it was my backup. It did have the GPS tracks on it, and a program where with maps I could have put it on there and used it if for some reason the Garmin's didn't work, but of course never had any problems with them. What else? I ran the double take mirror, and I really, I think that's the best mirror going. It gives you an actual mirror you can see out of when you want to see the traffic behind you. You can flip it up and look at things, that sort of thing. And of course it moves around a little bit if you have it up on a washboarded road, but other than that, I really like it, and it stores out of the way quite nicely. Anything else? What else should I talk about? Any other modifications? The bike, the engine is basically stock. I put the radiator hoses on it and stuff like that. Of course, the light we talked about. I think that's about it. Like I say, change the oil in it and clean the filter, and it'd be ready to go. Unfortunately, it's ready to go, but I'm going to be going into surgery for that ACL. So I'll be off bikes for a while, recovering. And is there anything else I can think of? I guess that's about it. So that's the bike. No fuss, no muss on the bike. Just real straightforward, real simple. I think the 350 for me, it was perfect. I think I actually might have gotten in trouble with a 500 a little bit. But in essence, the difference, this 350 and the 500, other than how you might attack a hill, basically the same. During the tour, on day 3, I did come off one of those big steep climbs. I bounced a little bit and went off to the side, and I was on a side slope, and I just Jarvised it back up onto the trail. No fuss, no muss. I was pretty pleased with that. But the bike handled everything. I mean, it it's a good bike. When you're out on the transition sections where you're just riding along and, you know, it's kind of monotonous almost in a few places, it's nice having the smooth 4-stroke. The gearing on this, let's see if I can remember right off the top of my head. I believe this is a 50, so a 50 on the back, and I am almost positive that I have the 14 on here. So this thing will go about, say, 45, 50 miles an hour really smoothly. Anything over that, you know, you're starting to wrap the engine out. And I almost never went over 50, especially on pavement. I wanted to protect the mooses. The rear one did get hot on the bypass on day 5, and I could see the, you know, some, you know, expanded, and I could see some leakage of either water or some of the lubrication. But it didn't, you know, I'm sure it would have taken more. I was just, you know, I was paranoid. I didn't want to ruin my mooses, but I played with mooses all you know, in preparation. I put mooses on and learned a little bit about them, and like I say, right now they're like perfect, you know, probably about, you know, say 10-12 pounds, somewhere in that range, maybe still a little bit harder than that on the rear, but the traction on them's great. So I didn't carry any no spare tubes, no tire irons, none of that stuff, which, you know, was nice. And I didn't ever have to worry about getting a flat in the middle of the night, or not the middle of the night, but in the middle of a rainstorm out on the side of a hill or something. Put stock foot pegs on. I did that for a very specific reason. I do not want a peg that sticks out further. That's just asking to clip a rock with it. You're wearing big motocross boots. No reason to have an oversized peg, in my opinion. It's just something to get in the way. You know, you may vary on that, but this had, you know, slightly oversized pegs on it last year, and that's what threw me off, you know, clipping a peg. And so, and I, you know, I hit the pegs a couple times, but I just I wanted a standard size peg. I didn't want an oversized peg. Anything else? You can see the grips that I ran. I don't remember what these are, but they're you know, they're a thin, hard grip. And my hands, this hand, my left hand, my thumb, you know, I've lost a little bit of that strength right there, you know, where you pinch, but no real problems. My throttle hand, a little carpal tunnel in my wrist. You know, I could feel it at the end of the day. Of course, I was icing anything I could feel like that. I would ice up at night as part of my recovery. I think that's about it. So I'll write this, I'll put this into my video, and if you guys have any questions, just ask away. Okay, so that's about it. Oh, one other thing is you're not gonna, you know, as you have already seen in this video, there's not a lot of GoPro footage, and that's because it became a distraction. So I left the GoPro. People with expensive sports cars out having fun. I left the GoPro off quite a bit, so there's not a lot of GoPro footage. And, you know, in my mind, it was more important to focus on what I was doing than try to do footage. All right, great tour. Thanks again to everybody that puts it on. Martin, great job, great event, and looking forward maybe to getting back up in Idaho and maybe doing a song party up there or something. All right, signing off.